All right. Well, from grief to gratitude, part two. And, we're going to hit on a couple of practices amongst the 30 some practices listed in the back of the Healing Through the Dark Emotions book by Miriam Greenspan. And really read the book the way you can, not the way you can't. Or not at all. Maybe you just, I'd get the book, keep it on the shelf till you're ready to read it, perhaps, or just work with the practices in the back. We're going to we'll have two poems and talk about sort of highlight two of the practices. So here's a poem I wrote 20 years ago to the day. It was the year after 9/11 happened, September 11th. And I just went out to the monastery, went out to the Abbey, and was hanging out in the back garden of the retreat house and just feeling what it felt like. I know exactly where I was. Most people can remember that. I was in my 7th grade classroom. Beautiful September day out here in Bardstown, cool, a little cooler than it is today, but blue sky. So much the same way it was in New York on that day. And Mr. Jones, Steve Jones, who was teaching down the hall, he walked by and he said, some asshole just flew his plane into the World Trade Center. I said, really? At that time, both he and I thought it was just some guy, some private plane, maybe got lost and flew into it. We had no idea. Well, as the day went on, we ended up, all the kids in the cafeteria watching on this thing, and quite a day. And so it was a year later, it was the day I had off, so I was out at the monastery trying to just come to grips with what it looked like a year later. And also just a little other recommendation is the epilogue in Healing Through the Dark Emotions. The epilogue there was written a month after 9/11 and was written before most of the book was written, actually. And it was Miriam Greenspan's thoughts on what had happened a month ago. Quite profound, worth reading today if you want to do a little private kind of being with that moment and all those people that were touched by that. Well, this is a poem I wrote 20 years ago today. It's called Ground Zero. For a few terribly beautiful days following 9/11, New York City became the heart of the world. For a brief, fragile moment in time, the business of America was no longer just business. In the absolute groundlessness that followed the collapse of what the world thought was so permanent, in the place that everybody called ground zero, the mind of America stopped for a while. And our hearts knew instantly that kindness was the only thing that really mattered. The absolute groundlessness that followed the collapse, what the world thought was so permanent, these big, huge monuments of iron and steel and glass, in the place that everybody came to call ground zero, the mind of America stopped for a while. And our hearts knew instantly that kindness was the only thing that really mattered. I wonder if you remember those times. It's hard to forget those times for me. And the amazing feeling. Maybe some of you were in New York City at that time. It's possible, but even in New York, people for a while, the mind of New York stopped and the heart of New York opened, and people were kind to one another. New Yorkers being kind to one another. It was startling and so hopeful because, and that's sort of what happens when disaster strikes you personally. The mind just stops, and if you're lucky, and then the heart opens because the mind, all the thinking we do just covers the mind, just covers the mind, just covers the mind. And when the mind stops, the heart opens. And all there is kindness, no judgment. Sure, horror, but there was a terrific kindness, people helping one another, if you remember the scene. And that was such a hopeful thing to see. I remember after the great earthquake, another disaster, the great earthquake in Haiti, after, it was still kind of like ash was falling, dust was falling, and there was a kind of conga line of Haitians going through the city, thanking God to still be alive. It's quite interesting, quite interesting. So this is that mix of, that's why I'm saying when you're working with grief or any of these dark emotions, they're bittersweet, but that was the sweet part. Kindness became obvious. Of course, after a couple of days, the mind went back. And but for that brief time, the whole world was in our corner. We haven't had a moment like that. It was a moment missed, really, if you think about it, because not long after, we had the president on a bullhorn on the rebels saying, we're coming to get you. And, of course, that was the start of the war on terror, which is kind of a weird oxymoron because war is terror. The Zen guys say you can't wash out blood with blood. Hatred can never be solved by hatred, and war cannot end a war on terror. War is terror. So anyway, 20 years down the line, and I wrote other poems about could we just grieve this for a while before we go and bomb somebody? Could we just grieve this for 49 days and see what it really means? Could we just help the people that were hurt just in our own town for 49 days, for 7 weeks, period of grieving for the Tibetans? And 30 months ago, when we started the first shaky Zoom meeting that Jill taught me to walk this plank into this world. I had no idea what we were doing, and it was a little shaky technologically on that day, but still, it was we're doing it out of grief. And what you saw was that that image of the mother of sorrow, Mary, is the image of contemplation and of the ability to grieve anything. In the Gospel of Luke, they have these lines: "What Mary pondered all these things in the silence of her heart." That's why she's the model of contemplation for all Catholic contemplatives. But that image of her holding the Twin Towers on smoking right in the center of her chest where her heart is, and that she could hold it. And if you really look at that icon, she's just holding it. And there's a couple little planes still flying around there, but she's not afraid. She's pondering this. She's holding this stuff. And for us, dealing with dark emotions like grief, they're mysteries. B, you have to hold them in the heart. There's no thinking your way through grieving, you see. So that's a great icon, a great example. And if you remember, you may have been there. Some of you were here on that very first meeting. the practice we did was it's practice 20 in the back of the Greenspan book, Tonglen. We started with the Buddhist, the Tibetan Buddhist way of trying to transform something dark into something healing, something horrible into something beautiful. And so many of you just came into it totally fresh, never heard of Tonglen. Check it out. You might be coming in for the first time here. And do check out Practice 20 because it gives you a little bit of insight into it. But that ability to breathe in the sorrow and to breathe back to yourself or to the world a sense of joy, a sense of relief. Yeah, that we've practiced that for a while before we went on to just working with the second practice that she mentions, which is what we work with most of the time, is just basic meditation, mindfulness meditation. In any tradition, it's mindfulness meditation. The Buddhists don't have any, like copyright on that, because unless you're mindful, you're not really meditating. You're just sitting there thinking your ass off, which I do from time to time too often. Actually, you're just sitting and thinking about life. And then you go, oh, yeah, okay. And you let the thoughts go. And then you could be pondering life. You ponder in the silence and in the stillness and in the heart. And depending on what's going on in your life, you might have a lot of mystery to ponder. Oh, okay. So here's the second poem, which I just wrote this morning because I had a whole different presentation planned, and then this poem came out. So here we are. So you're the first people to hear it. And this is about meditation. This is about just that basic thing where you sit down, sit your butt down, and you get still, and you get quiet, and you listen with the ear of the heart to your life. Mysterious, beautiful, or tragic, you listen to your life, and the heart listens. When the mind starts thinking about something, the listening ends, and then you say, oh yeah, all right. When you catch yourself thinking, you let the mind go. Well, this is about where that all leads. I call this just a way to heal the world, which is our approach here. That's why we'll end up in December talking about how doing your own personal grief work is the only hope to transform our culture, the world out there. It's where it starts. If you can't transform your own grief and your own despair and your own fear, how could you expect it to appear out in the world? We do somehow, we yell at the TV screen. Why can't you guys get it together? Well, anyway, here's the poem. Nothing can hurt you if you understand that whatever you are going through is your invitation to participate in the healing of the world. Nothing can hurt you if you understand that whenever you're going through whatever it is your invitation to participate in the healing of the world. Meditation is a journey in which you take everyone with you. Friends, enemies, and billions of folks you've never met. We just realized that now, in a few minutes we'll sit down. It's like it's our own trip, we shut our eyes in our own houses. Maybe we are alone. But meditation is a journey in which you take everyone with you. You're taking your friends with you. You're taking your enemies with you. And billions of folks that you've never met. Your meditation is the kind of prayer that is not specific, but rather includes everyone, past, present, and to come. Just grapple with that for a minute. You know, your meditation is the kind of prayer that is not specific, doesn't have a purpose or a target, but rather includes everyone, past, present, and to come. Sitting in silence with this intention is reinforcing the basic truth of interconnectedness of all humans with the whole of creation. So just this act of, if nothing else, if you're sitting in silence, and if you have this intention of including everybody, that you're sitting with the whole cosmos, if you want, you can go beyond the planet if you want, you're sitting with all beings everywhere. It's a good intention. That's the right intention. That's to me the most interesting and pregnant intention. So you're sitting with everybody in the whole cosmos. You're reinforcing this basic truth that we're starting to learn scientifically, ecologically, what the contemplatives have known for thousands of years. We're starting to get the idea it's all connected. Everything's connected to everything. A butterfly, you know, flaps her wings in Bardstown, and it's sort of like touching a spider's web. You can touch it anywhere and the whole web vibrates. So they used to say, you know, butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil and it's felt in Beijing, you know. Nothing is disconnected from anything else, which means what you do has terrific significance to changing the whole atmosphere on the planet. You know, to reinforce this thing we know is the truth of interconnection between all human beings and all of creation. In meditation, everything belongs to you and you belong to everything. Let that sink in. In meditation, everything belongs to you and you belong to everything. Sorrow shared is halved and joy shared is doubled. Sorrow shared is cut in half. Joy shared is doubled. That's just how it is. Yeah. So that's how you heal the world. It's got to start with you. The Dalai Lama said the only possible platform for world peace is finding peace within yourself and then being that peace. Gandhi said the same thing. Be the change you want to see in the world. It's so simple that we think it's much more complicated than that. We think we can't do anything. Yeah, we can do everything, but just our peace, you know. And if, so that's really why we sit. We're not sitting to get somewhere. We're sitting to be still, be quiet enough so that we can listen to our own life. Our life knows absolutely where it's going. That's actually something you got to realize in the second half of life, especially when you've gone through the first half of life and all the things it takes to survive on this planet. Here we are, we've survived. So we accomplished things. We kept a roof over our head, maybe barely, but there it is. Maybe there's a hole in it, but there it is. Okay. And, but in the second half of life, especially, some people don't have any worries about security at all. Survival is another story. It can change in a second, as my big brother knows now. Some of you know that. 1 minute you're walking, next minute you're falling, you're breaking stuff. So you don't know. Your survival is always up for grabs. Go to sleep at night and don't wake up. I'm always so glad to wake up. It's a gift. So yeah, you could have all that wired, but then you get to the third, we really should talk about the third act, because really life's going so long, it's not really two halves. But when you really get into the third act of life, sometimes you can lose the thread of where you're going. And so listening, your life knows, your heart's tuned into it. Oh, the mind actually gets in the way. So we take, take a little time every day to do this kind of thing, not just on Sunday. It's great that you're here and we reinforce it, but every day try to remember your connection to the sacred and actually feel it and let it direct you. You see, that's the whole idea. By the way, 4 bold pilgrims are coming in tomorrow evening, and we're gonna do this for 6 days intensively. It's called a sesshin. Sesshin in 2 characters in Japanese. It just means to clarify your consciousness. Sesshin. Yeah, it's this teaching. I shook this up last night, so it's not quite clear, but we all know what this kind of life is. And so that's primarily what we do when we meditate. We're trying to settle down. So I think that's good enough for now. Check the Greenspan epilogue if you want to go a little deeper into 9/11. Okay, and into that grieving. Right. Well, let's get ready just to sit.